SOGI belongs to everyone. We all have a sexual orientation, we all have a gender identity, and so do all of the students everywhere.
SOGI inclusion isn't optional. Making space for LGBTQ+ people, for Two-Spirit people, is not optional. It's a right.
Inclusive excellence is a commitment that we make to ensure that learning environments are both challenging in terms of the ideas students want to learn and supportive in them bringing their entire self to that work.
One of the things we realize is that inclusion must be central to everything that we do. This includes setting out and demonstrating leadership commitment, building individual and organizational capacity for change, and a clear accountability process.
This, there again, is not a matter of individual politics. It's a matter of locating it within the competency framework in order to be inclusive and protective of all people with whom we work.
I'm going to introduce our guests now. Welcome to this panel. The title of the panel is The Trans Spectrum, Perspectives for All Educators.
I think professionals really need to understand who they're treating, who they're teaching, who they're with. The best place to get this type of understanding is when you're in a professional training program, and you can talk about all the variations of people that are out there.
Research shows us many things. Two of the things that it shows us as themes are relationships and knowledge.
I'm Cormac, and when I was in 8th grade, I came out as trans and transitioned to being a boy.
Students that come into the program here who are trans and non-binary are particularly interested and needing and wanting relationships that show them that people understand where they come from and are interested in meeting them where they are. Knowledge, on the other hand, is something that we can all develop.
It's about not assuming someone's gender identity or how they like to be referred, and so just referring them by their name is really a great way to practice inclusion.
The queer and trans students in our student consultations actively or explicitly spoke about the amount of time and energy that they often spend in their classrooms or at the university advocating for themselves, making sure that their chosen names are used or that they see their lives reflected in the classroom, in our curriculum.
Oftentimes I am told, no, we don't have a gender-neutral bathroom, but use the one that you're most comfortable with. And for me, I'm not comfortable in either, and so it actually does prevent quite the barrier.
Marginalization in its many forms has serious consequences, and consequences for life and consequences for learning. We know that when they see themselves represented in the world around us, whether that's pop culture, the curriculum of our schools, when their stories are told, when their voices are honored and respected, we know that they're more likely to experience success.
As your teacher, creating a respectful classroom where everyone can learn regardless of your gender, nationality, sexuality, special needs, etc. At the moment it's optional to have this statement of inclusion.
Asking ourselves, how can I adjust my language to make my classroom more inclusive, is a phenomenal first step. If I never use examples that reflect the lives of the students or their families in my classroom, they're certainly not going to learn what I'm hoping that they will in my classroom, but also it will disempower them. And my goal as an educator is that the students in the classroom feel seen and feel known.
When you use a young person's chosen name, really, that has a positive impact on their mental health. For us, what that means in the educational context is we want to make sure that when students are going to student services, going into their classrooms, interacting with peers or faculty, that chosen name is reflected back to them.
If you are in front of a class and you introduce yourself and your pronouns, it really normalizes that experience. And so as students learn from each other, they can pick that up.
I think the issues of thinking about sexual orientation and gender identity in an intersectional fashion are critical. I think not only because it's the right thing to do, but I also think that as we talk to students, that they are looking at the world in a more intersectional manner than maybe many of us did early on. And that in a Canadian context, that means that looking at issues of indigeneity, two-spiritness, as all part of each other, not the same, but that the issues have to be taken up at the same time in order for us to be able to then say that we're addressing the needs of all different kinds of students.
Indigenous epistemologies are linked to SOGI inclusiveness, more fluidity, greater fluidity around gender identity, sexual orientation, and the roles and expressions associated with those. And so identity, gender identity, sexual orientation are all nurtured within this holistic paradigm.
I think that different identities and different diversity of humanity, it's just how things are, and the thing we have to do is learn together and grow together.
One of the big successes at UBC is the way in which we have learned from our students and worked with our students in the creation of more inclusive environments. Students train us on what it means to create a respectful community. They see the gaps, they experience being excluded, and I hope we create an environment where their voices can help us address those issues and change it.
The Equity and Inclusion Office really kind of works to support inclusion more broadly on campus. The work around physical environments, like the work that we've done around gender inclusive washrooms and change rooms, the work around policies and systems change, and then the work around education. And so when it comes to SOGI inclusion, we've really done work at those three levels. On this campus, we have lots of people who have expertise, lots of knowledge, and lots of energy also around SOGI inclusion.
What I'd like you to kind of try to wrap your heads around this morning is to see gender and sexuality as spectrums, as opposed to rigid boxes that we try to fit people into.
The development of educational opportunities and the constant inclusion of gender identity and sexual orientation has allowed our staff to also come forward and to be seen and heard in ways that they may not have been in the past. Our individual staff and our teams of student affairs professionals started asking questions about pronouns, about name tags, about the ways in which services had perhaps been developed with gender identity as an underscoring element of the service. This is a process that I think all educational environments will be really well served by.
We recognize that the LGBTQ community hasn't received enough attention in our curriculum. And I would be the first to suggest that I think we need more faculty development around that. Addressing SOGI issues is a huge part of being professional.
Workshops for faculty, for staff, to assist in that process of acquiring the discourse, being able to talk and recognize important features or flags within your own discourse, acquiring enough of a comfort within discussing it with students, because as soon as you do, your students start to speak out. They start to come out. It starts to feel safer.
When my students come to talk to me about coming out stories or navigating their lives as gay Christians in the Christian church, the stories are often very painful ones. And the leadership has taken very seriously the need for better inclusion. And these conversations have been ongoing, trying to understand what Trinity Western has not been doing that they could be doing to make the university a safe place for LGBTQ students.
This work that we do, it doesn't just happen in the classroom, it ripples throughout our communities.
I think no matter what frame we're in, what profession, we all can do our part to try to make LGBTQ people feel like they belong and they're comfortable and they're safe with us.
To me, that's excluding people. If you're not including every single student that might be in your class, just to have students know about the beautiful diversity that we have in our world and to be able to deal with that.
SOGI UBC is doing something remarkable and in many ways is really leading the world in its work around gender and sexuality. The job of a university is really to tackle the questions that the public is sometimes too busy to concern themselves with, but which really matter for everyone's daily lives.
By advancing SOGI and inclusion overall, we are removing barriers to full participation and ensuring that all can have full access and opportunity to maximize their potential.
When universities are supporting trans and non-binary people and trans studies, they're supporting a device for our society to really wrestle with gender in more deep and meaningful ways.